Good evening, everybody. Michael D. sitting behind the mic again with my sidekick, Ron. Ron, what's the topic for tonight, brother?
Topic for tonight is prophecy really history in advance?
Wow. So, Ron, for those who don't know what prophecy really is, tell them what it is.
Well, true prophecy is usually told to us by what's called a prophet. Of course, there are false prophets and there are true prophets and things like that. So, but the thing here is that today we have these psychics that claim they can tell your future sometimes by reading the palm of your hand or whatever they do.
Mm-hmm.
And they could be 70-80% correct. Mm-hmm. And you could be fooled by this and say, wow, this is great. I'm going back to them. I want to find out what's going to happen with 70 or 80% of my future life here. But they're being general with things, and the things that happen in the lives of most people, they're telling you what's going to happen in your life.
Right.
But biblical prophets they're 100% correct. Otherwise, it wouldn't be in Scripture. This is what I found to be true some years ago when I started getting interested in prophecy, mainly. And the main book I picked out, studied prophecy in, was the book of Daniel in the Old Testament.
Okay.
So, anyway, especially the second chapter of Daniel, but you can't just, well, let's put it this way. You have to touch on the first chapter of Daniel to understand what's going to go on in the second chapter, and then go a little bit into the third chapter of Daniel, too. You don't have to stop there, but I would stop there because after that, it's a lot of trouble with King Nebuchadnezzar and how he came to go out of his mind and come back into his mind and all that kind of stuff. We're talking about things, though, that really go back 2,600 years. That's a long time now. But that's a long time ago.
Amen.
But nevertheless, we have affidavits and everything to prove that these things really happened, that this ancient history is true history, and that there was a prophet back then named Daniel who really was given inspiration to be able to divulge what the future would be. Actually, the shocking thing is Daniel didn't have this dream about the future first. It was King Nebuchadnezzar, a heathen king, the king of Babylon, the first world ruling kingdom, who had the dream. That king, Nebuchadnezzar, had this dream, and he couldn't remember it. So he called all his wise men in, and the wise men came from the soothsayers and Chaldeans and wise men and all that. They came from lands that he had conquered. He picked the best out of all those lands. And when Israel gave up without a fight and was conquered, Daniel and his three friends were picked to go to the king's court and become one of his advisors or wise men. And the story really begins in the first chapter of Daniel, where Daniel and his three friends, they call them Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they decided that they weren't going to eat from the king's table because there was food there that was sacrificed to idols, they felt, and they didn't want to take a chance on eating that kind of bad food. And they wouldn't drink wine, fermented wine, or anything like that, any alcoholic beverages. They wanted to stay within their mind. So all they wanted was just fruits, vegetables, and water. That's all they wanted. No meat in their diet, nothing from the king's table. When all the rest of these wise men, these Chaldeans and all those other people, they were eating from the king's table. Well, King Nebuchadnezzar thought that his food was the best anybody could eat. It was great for the mind and everything. So Daniel and his three friends, they told the king, through somebody anyway, that they were willing to be tested at the end of a 30-day period to see if they were still within their right minds and everything, eating what they were eating, and just as healthy as anybody else, and just as smart as anybody else. So after the end of that 30-day period, yes, they were tested. And you know what? They were found to be 10 times smarter than all the rest of those advisors to the king. So go figure that out. They did the right thing, and they honored God in doing that. So
sounds like you did.
Then we moved to the second chapter. The first chapter was had to be mentioned because the king came to know them after that, see, and kind of trust them with things because they were smart. Now, in the second chapter, we find the king waking up probably about 3 or 4 in the morning, our time, 3 or 4 in the morning, dark out and everything like that. And he woke up startled from a dream he had that he couldn't remember. It was quite an awesome dream. And since he couldn't remember it, really, and it bothered him not remembering it, and he wanted to know what that dream was and what it meant, both what it was and what it meant. So he called in what he thought were all the wise men came in. But we find out later in the second chapter that Daniel and his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were not there. But all the rest of them were the Chaldeans and all those other people from conquered lands, and smart people, but 10 times less smart than Daniel and his friends. So they were there in the court room just outside Nebuchadnezzar's bedroom, probably, and what he asked them was, the wise man, he said, I had a dream. In so many words, he said he had a dream that bothered him, that he couldn't remember, and he wanted them to tell him the dream and then the interpretation of the dream. Now, apparently, Nebuchadnezzar had been telling them dreams all along, and they just throw any kind of explanation for that dream that he had all the time. They'd be doing that to him, fooling him. And he'd be happy with that explanation and think, oh, they're so smart, they know how to interpret these dreams that I have. But now, it's a different thing. Nebuchadnezzar wants to know what that dream was, if they can come up with that, and then give him the explanation of the dream. Well, or the interpretation anyway. So they were befuddled by this so-called wise men of the court, and they said, but only the gods can know what you dreamed. We don't know what you dreamed. Well, could they get in touch with their gods? No. The thing is that he became mad, very angry with them when they couldn't come up with the dream. And of course, there's no interpretation to a dream that they couldn't come up with. So he decided he's going to do away with all of them. He's going to have them all destroyed, all the wise men, Babylon destroyed, and he's going to start over again. Well, one of the captains of the guard, who was pretty friendly with Daniel and his friends, came to see them, to take them, to put them into a prison to be executed in the morning right along with all the other wives there. Now that wasn't very fair because Daniel and his friends, for some reason, weren't asked to come to the court, weren't summoned there to do this. So Daniel asked this captain of the guards to please go see the king and see if he will have him come over and see the king and give him the dream and the explanation for the dream. All right? So he did that. And meanwhile, Daniel and his three friends prayed that one of them would receive the dream, that the king had the exact same dream, and that they would know the interpretation of that dream.
Okay, Ron, let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
Okay. Who do you think?
Yes.
Who do you think was the best angel versus who was the meanest angel?
Wait, who was the best what?
Who's the meanest angel?
Who's the meanest angel?
That's right.
Well, Lucifer was an angel who became Satan. I mean, if that's what you mean, I mean, what does this have to do with what I'm talking about here with the dream and all that?
You know, Ron, it just crossed my mind, okay? For our listeners, who was the best angel?
You know, it's funny that you should be mentioning angels here because I wasn't going to mention this, but I think the angel Gabriel came to explain to Daniel what the dream meant or something like that. I do believe. But I would say the best angel was probably Gabriel. It mentions him in Scripture a lot. I know that there is one called the Archangel, and that was Michael. But there's a lot of controversy over whether or not this Archangel was really an angel made by God, like the other angels, or was this angel the Son of God, you know, before he became the man we know today as Christ, when he was incarnated into a human being. So, without getting into controversy there, Archangel might have just meant head of angels, not an angel himself, you see, Michael. So, actually, I think the book of Revelation says, in the last day, Michael will stand up, and et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, what would a mere angel do, standing up to make war upon people that were against God's people? Right. Anyway, we'll get back to this, where I was, where as the guard went to see Nebuchadnezzar to see if he would let Daniel come and explain things to him, they were praying that one of them would get the dream that the king had. And Daniel was the one of the four that got that dream. And he was ready to go into the king. So he did. And the king welcomed him. And there's only one reason why the king welcomed Daniel. Because he had already made his mind up to kill all these wise men and start over. But he admired Daniel and his three friends because of the way they tested out. And they were smart. He knew it. And maybe he realized they weren't there with the others when nobody came up with the dream. No, Daniel went ahead and just told him the dream. First of all, and if you have any questions here, Mike, you just ask them. But first of all, he gave all credit to God, the God of heaven, that he had this dream, the same dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. It wasn't anything he conjured up himself. He didn't want to take any credit for it. Daniel did not want to